I still remember the smell of that morning. Cold instant coffee, burnt toast on a cracked plate. The kind of breakfast you don't really eat. You just push it around with a plastic spoon until the caseworker says it's time. It was the last breakfast my sister and I would ever eat at Street Bernadette's Home for Children. Ren was 15. I had turned 18 at midnight, which meant that under Tennessee state law, from that moment on, I was no longer a ward of the state. I was a free woman. A free woman with $150 folded inside a sock, a cardboard box of paperbacks, and a slip of paper in my coat pocket. That slip of paper had an address on it, a foster home in Memphis, a place Ren was supposed to be transferred to in 3 days. 3 days. I read that address every night for a week. I read it until my eyes burned. I read it until the ink got soft from my thumb running over it. And every single time, I made my sister the same promise: I will not let that happen. The rain was coming down in that slow march drizzle that soaks you without you noticing. Ren stood next to me on the curb outside street. Bernadette's holding her little duffel bag against her chest like it was a stuffed animal. Her hair was still damp from the shower. She kept her eyes on her shoes. She hadn't said much that morning. When you grow up in a place like that, you learn how to be small. You learn how to fold yourself into the smallest version of yourself, so nobody notices. Ren had learned it better than I had. The caseworker came out and handed me a brown envelope. Inside was a final check for $257, my high school diploma, and a list of phone numbers for shelters. She didn't say goodbye. She just patted my arm and said, "Good luck, sweetheart." Then the door clicked shut behind her. That click is a sound I will never forget as long as I live. For a long minute, Red and I just stood there, watching our breath cloud in the cold air, watching cars hiss by on the wet road. 2 girls and a cardboard box and a duffel bag and nowhere on this earth to go. If you have ever stood on a curb like that with the door of your past locked behind you in the future, nothing but gray sky, I want you to do me a favor. Take a deep breath and know that you are not alone tonight. So many of us have stood there. So many of us are still standing there. If that feeling is familiar to you, leave a heart in the comments. I would be honored to know you are here. Now, let me tell you what happened next. My phone buzzed. It was an old prepaid thing with a cracked screen, and the number on it wasn't one I recognized. I almost let it go to voicemail. I almost let everything go to voicemail back then. But something made me answer. Hello? Am I speaking with Marin Whitfield? The voice on the other end was older, careful, kind in a way I wasn't used to. Yes. Miss Whitfield, my name is Atticus Brennan. I was your grandfather's attorney, and I've been waiting 2 years to make this phone call. I had to lean against the wet brick wall. I did not trust my knees. You see, our pop, Silas Whitfield, had died 2 years ago. A bad heart. He went quick, they said. He went peaceful. But after the funeral, our older brothers, Beckett and Hollis, had taken everything. Pop's little white house on Maple Street, his savings, the stocks he had been quietly building for 40 years. They had sat us down at a polished table in a polished office, and they had explained to us that Pop's affairs were complicated. There were debts. There were legal things we couldn't understand. They were going to handle it. They were going to put a little money in trust for us to make sure we were taken care of. That word taken care of has never sounded the same to me since. What they did was sell everything. What they did was sign papers handing us over to the state. What they did was walk away with hundreds of thousands of dollars between them while their 2 baby sisters got bunk beds at Street. Bernadette's and 3 sets of clothes each that smelled like industrial soap. Beckett was 32, a lawyer with a fancy haircut. Hollis was 28, a real estate broker with a nicer car than he could afford. They had not called us once in 2 years. Not on Christmas, not on Ren's birthdays, not when I graduated high school in a borrowed gown. Not once. So when this man on the phone said he had been waiting 2 years to call me, my heart started knocking against my ribs in a way I did not understand. Miss Whitfield, your grandfather left something for you and for your sister Ren. He was very specific that I was not to contact you until your 18th birthday. He was very specific that I was not to contact you until your 18th birthday, which, if I'm not mistaken, was last night at midnight. I did not answer. I could not. It is a property, he went on, a commercial property in a town called Belrose, Tennessee. It is not part of the main estate. It was placed in a separate trust in your 2 names years ago. Your brothers were never made aware of it. The cardboard box was getting heavy, the rain was getting cold, but I held that phone like it was the last warm thing in the world. "What kind of property?" I whispered. There was a small pause. I could hear him smile. It is a garage, Miss Whitfield, an auto repair shop. Your grandfather called it Last Light Auto. Last light. I closed my eyes, and just for a second, I could see him. Pop, pop, standing in a doorway with the sun behind him, wiping his hands on a red rag, the kind of grease on his fingers that no soap could ever fully wash out. I could smell him. Oil and pine and pipe tobacco. I could hear his voice. Everything can be fixed, Marin girl. You just have to listen to what it's telling you. There is a problem, however, Mr. Brennan said, and his voice got softer. The property is behind on its taxes, several years behind. If the debt is not addressed soon, the county will seize it and put it up for auction. I have done what I could to delay the process, but there is a clock on this. I would estimate 60 days, perhaps less. He named a number. I will not name it for you here, but I will tell you that compared to $150 in a sock, it might as well have been the national debt. I should have said no. I should have hung up the phone. I should have walked Ren to the bus station and bought us 2 tickets to anywhere warmer and tried to put together a life out of paper. But I looked at my sister. She was watching me with those big, quiet eyes, and I thought about that slip of paper in my pocket, a foster home in Memphis. 3 days. And I thought about Pop Pop's voice. Everything can be fixed. Where is your office, Mr. Brennan? Ren and I took the bus into the city that afternoon. We sat in the back, and she leaned her head against my shoulder, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt her relax. Just a little. Just enough. Mr. Brennan's office was in an old brick building with a green awning, the kind of building that has been there longer than anybody in it. He met us at the door himself. He was taller than I expected and thinner, with white hair that needed a comb, and the kindest tired eyes I have ever seen behind a pair of thick glasses. He poured us each a cup of weak tea, and he gave Ren a butterscotch candy from a little crystal dish on his desk. Nobody had given my sister a piece of candy in a long, long time. She held it in her hand like it was made of gold. He slid a thick manila envelope across the desk. The deed, he said. The tax notices. The keys. And one thing more. He reached into a drawer and he pulled out a second envelope. This one was smaller, yellow with age, sealed with a thick blob of red wax, the way Pop Pop used to seal our birthday cards when we were little girls. My name and Ren's name were written on the front, in his blocky, careful hand. I did not open it then. I could not. I just touched the wax with the tip of my finger, and I felt the tears slide down my face without permission. Your grandfather, Mr. Brennan, said quietly, was the most stubborn man I ever had the privilege to know. He saw your brothers for exactly what they were long before they became it. He set this up years ago. A small island. For the 2 of you. He told me, Atticus, a person needs a place to stand. Just one solid piece of ground. From there they can move the world. I could not speak. Ren reached over and squeezed my hand. Her little fingers were so cold. There is something else you should know, Mr. Brennan said. Your brothers signed off on the main estate months ago. Legally, they have no claim to this property. They were never even told it existed. But if they do find out, and given the nature of your brothers, they will find out, they may try to make trouble for you. I want you to be prepared for that. I nodded. I did not know what else to do. What's in Belrose? Ren asked. Her first words all morning. Mr. Brennan smiled at her. A real smile, the kind that crinkles all the way up to the eyes. A whole town that loved your grandfather, sweetheart, and a building with your names on the deed. The rest, I'm afraid, is up to the 2 of you. We took the Greyhound to Belrose that same evening. I used $28 of the $150 for 2 tickets, and a hot dog we split at the station, and a paper cup of coffee for me, and a chocolate milk for Ren. She slept against my shoulder the whole way. The bus smelled like diesel and old vinyl. I watched the city give way to suburbs, and the suburbs give way to long stretches of farmland, and the farmland give way to the rolling, dark green foothills of the Smoky Mountains. I have lived in Tennessee my whole life, but I had never been to that part of it. Pop Pop had talked about it sometimes. He had grown up there before he moved to the city to marry Grandma. He used to say the air in those mountains was different. He used to say a person could think clearly there. The bus pulled into Belrose just after dark. It was not so much a station as a wooden bench under a tin awning. The town stretched out along one main street, a diner with a buzzing neon sign that said Della's. A hardware store. A feed store with bags of seeds stacked in the window. A Baptist church on a little rise, with a white steeple that caught the last pink light. A blinking yellow traffic light at the only intersection. That was Belrose. If you have ever come into a small town for the first time, at dusk, with the smell of wood smoke in the air and the cicadas just starting up, you know what I am talking about. There is a feeling that comes with it, a feeling like the world has slowed down, a feeling like maybe you can breathe here. Ren stepped off the bus and looked around with her mouth slightly open. It's pretty, she whispered. I had not heard her call anything pretty in 2 years. A man in a wool cap was waiting for us at the bench. Mr. Brennan had arranged it. His name was Earl Hatcher, he told us. He had worked for our Pop Pop more years ago than he could count, back when he was young and Pop Pop was just starting out. He was 66 years old, with a face like a piece of weathered cedar and a soft, slow drawl that made every word feel deliberate. He had a beat-up gray pickup truck. Heard the Whitfield girls were coming in tonight, he said. Didn't seem right you walking that road in the dark. Hop on in. He took our cardboard box and put it in the bed of the truck like it was made of glass. Belrose disappeared behind us in about 30 seconds. The road got narrower, the trees got closer. The headlights cut a tunnel through the dark, and the only sound was the engine and the wind and the radio playing some old country song on low. Earl did not try to make conversation, he just drove. I appreciated him for it. After about a mile, he slowed down. He pulled off onto a gravel driveway that I would have missed in broad daylight. The headlights swept across 2 big oak trees and a row of overgrown bushes, and then they landed on it. Last Light Auto. It sat back from the road, half swallowed by vines, with a long flat roof and big bay doors, and a single sign hanging crooked from one chain. The paint on the sign was so faded I could barely read it. The windows were filmed over with years of dust. Cobwebs hung in the corners like old lace. It looked like a place the world had forgotten. I should have felt despair. I really should have. But instead, I felt something else. Something I am still not sure how to name. It was like coming home to a house you had never been to before. Ren stepped out of the truck and stood very still, looking up at the sign. Pop Pop's place, she said softly. I did not know. She remembered she'd been so little when he was sick, but she remembered, Earl Hatcher took off his cap and held it against his chest. Silas Whitfield was the finest mechanic this county ever saw, he said. He fixed my daddy's tractor in 1972 when nobody else could. He fixed my first car when I couldn't pay him a dime. He told me, son, I'll fix it now and you bring me a pie when your mama's apple trees come in. That was him. That was your granddaddy. He cleared his throat, tried to make it sound like he had a cough. I'm awful glad you girls are here. I had not eaten since that morning. I was wet and cold and shaking. But standing there in that gravel drive, in front of that crooked sign, with my little sister beside me and a stranger's voice cracking with love for a man who had loved us, I felt something settle inside my chest. A place to stand. The front key was stiff with rust. I had to put my shoulder into the door, and it groaned open like it was waking from a long sleep. The smell that rolled out was the smell of my entire childhood. Cold metal, old oil, dust, a hint of pipe tobacco. Somehow, after all these years, I switched on my phone's flashlight, and the beam danced across a small cluttered office. A wooden desk, a green vinyl chair, cracked along the seat, a filing cabinet, a wall calendar still turned to August of 2 years past, the month he died. Ren walked in behind me very quietly, like she was afraid to wake something up. She ran her small hand along the edge of the desk, and then she stopped. Marin, she whispered, come see. I went over. I shone the light down. There, carved into the soft pine of the desktop, was a tiny 5-pointed star. About the size of a quarter, the lines worn smooth by 40 years of elbows resting on it. I sat down very hard in the green vinyl chair. I was 6 years old when I made the scratch that became that star. I had been sitting in Pop Pop's lap, playing with one of his ledger pens, and I had pressed too hard. He had laughed. He had pulled out his pocket knife. He had said, well, little Marin, let's make it pretty, and he had turned my mistake into a star. I had forgotten that. I had forgotten so much. I put my head down on the desk right next to the star, and I cried. The kind of crying that does not make any sound. The kind of crying that just shakes you from somewhere very deep, like a building shifting on its foundation. Ren came around the desk. She climbed into my lap, even though she was 15 and almost as tall as me. She put her arms around my neck, and she held me while I cried for a man who had loved us before the world even knew our names. When I finally lifted my head, I saw that Earl Hatcher had stepped back outside to give us privacy. He was leaning on his truck in the dark, smoking a cigarette, looking up at the stars. That was the kind of man he was. I dried my eyes with the back of my hand. I looked at my little sister, sitting in my lap with her face streaked and her hair a mess. This is going to be our home, I told her. She nodded. She believed me. I did not yet know how I was going to make that true. I did not know about the back taxes that were waiting to swallow us. I did not know about the brothers who would soon come crawling out of their suits to take this from us. I did not know that this old building still had secrets, hidden in its floorboards and inside its iron tools, secrets that would change everything. I only knew that we were here, that a stranger named Earl was smoking a cigarette under the stars to give us a moment alone, that a faded sign was swinging in the wind, with the words "Last Light" written on it in our grandfather's hand. And that somewhere in that office, in a sealed envelope with a blob of red wax, our Pop was waiting to speak to us one more time. That night, we slept on a pile of canvas tarps in the office. Earl brought back 2 thick wool blankets from his truck and a thermos of black coffee and a little bag of biscuits his wife had packed for us in case we needed them. "Della's diner opens at 6, he said from the doorway. "You girls come on down in the morning. Miss Della will be expecting you. Don't argue with her about it. Nobody wins that argument." He tipped his cap, and he was gone. Wren fell asleep in about 4 minutes flat, curled up under one of the blankets with her cheek on my arm. I stayed awake a long time, listening. The building made all kinds of soft sounds, settling sounds, breathing sounds. A house, remembering it, had people in it again. Just before I drifted off, I reached into my coat and pulled out that yellow envelope, the one with the red wax seal. I held it on my chest. I did not open it. I just held it. "In the morning," I told my sister, "in the morning, when there is light, we will read what Pop has to say." That was my last thought before I slept. If you have made it this far with us, I just want to say thank you. Truly. I know your time is precious. If this story is reaching you somewhere in your kitchen or your living room or in bed at night with the television on low, I hope you know that I am glad you are here. Stay with me. Because tomorrow morning, in Pop's little dusty office, my sister and I are going to start finding the things he hid for us. And I promise you, what we find is going to break your heart in the best way. Now, let me tell you about the next morning. I woke up to sunlight, real sunlight, slanting in through the dirty office window, painting yellow stripes across the dusty floor. Wren was already up, sitting cross-legged on the wool blanket, holding the wax-sealed envelope in her lap like it was a small wounded bird. She had not opened it. She had waited for me. "Should we?" she whispered. I nodded. I broke the wax with my thumbnail. Inside, there was a single thick page, folded twice, Pop's blocky handwriting, the kind of handwriting that came from a man who had filled out work orders his whole life. "My dear girls, if you are reading this, then I am gone and the two of you have found your way to my old place on the highway. I am sorry I am not there to make you breakfast. I would have liked that. I would have liked a lot of things. Your brothers are going to take the house and the money. I have known this for a long time. They are like their daddy was. They look at the world and they only see what they can carry off. They do not know how to love a thing. But you two, Marin, you knew from the time you could walk. You used to follow me around this garage with your little hands always dirty, and you were never afraid of grease, and you were never afraid of hard things. You will be all right, my brave one. I am not worried about you. I am only worried that you will try to carry too much. Wren, my sweet bird, you see what other people miss, you always did, from the time you were 3 years old, sitting at the kitchen table watching me fix your grandmother's broken music box. You saw the little spring nobody else could see. I am leaving you something special. Atticus will give it to you when the time is right. This shop is yours now. Both of yours, equally. It is not much. It is mortgaged, and it owes taxes, and it is going to fight you a little before it lets you love it. But there is enough here, if you know where to look. I have left you what I could. 3 rules, girls. The shop rules. Remember them. 1. Always check the pressure. 2. Never force a bolt. 3. The most valuable parts are always hidden in plain sight. I love you more than I ever found the words to say. Your Pop. That was the letter. I read it twice. Then I read it again. Wren had her face pressed into my shoulder, and she was crying without making a single sound. We sat there on the floor for a long, long time. After a while, I noticed something. Behind the desk, where Pop's chair would have been, a square of the old yellow linoleum was curled up at one corner, like it had been lifted many, many times. The most valuable parts are always hidden in plain sight. I crawled over, and I pulled. The linoleum came up easy. Underneath was the bare wood subfloor, and one of the planks was a little shorter than the others, no nails on the ends. Just sitting there, fitted in. I lifted it. Inside was a wooden box, long and shallow and lined with old velvet. Our 2 names were burned into the lid. Wren and I both stopped breathing. I lifted the box out. I set it on the desk. I opened it. Letters, dozens and dozens of letters, tied in bundles with brown twine, each bundle marked with a year, going back 12 years. Going back to the year our mother and father had died and Pop-Pop had taken us in. We had been at Street Bernadette's for 2 years. He had been writing to us for 12. Wren picked up the oldest bundle. The twine was stiff with age. She untied it with her clever little fingers, and she pulled out the top envelope, and we read it together. Dear Marin, dear Wren, today you came to live with me. You are too little to understand what has happened to your mama and your daddy. Marin, you held your sister's hand the whole way home from the hospital. Wren, you fell asleep on the kitchen floor next to the dog. I do not know how to be a parent. I am 63 years old and a grouchy old fool, but I am going to learn. I promise you I am going to learn. We read another, and another, and another. There was one for the day I lost my first tooth. There was one for the day Wren learned to ride a bike, with the training wheels coming off and her flying down the driveway with her hair behind her like a flag. There was one for every Christmas, and every birthday, and the day I won the spelling bee in 4th grade. There was one for the time Wren had a bad fever, and he had stayed up the whole night with cold cloths. 12 years of love written down and tied up with twine, buried under a floorboard for us to find. If you are listening to me right now, and you have ever lost somebody, and you have ever wished just once that they could speak to you again, that they could send you a letter from wherever they are, then you understand what we felt. There are no words for it. There is only the feeling of being seen all the way through by somebody who is no longer here to see you. It is a kind of miracle, the quietest kind there is. We were still reading when my phone rang. I jumped. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I should have known. I really should have. Hello. Well, well. Little sister. It was Hollis. My brother. The real estate one. His voice was syrup smooth, the way it always got when he wanted something from you. How did you get this number? I said. Flat. Not a question. Doesn't matter. Listen, Marin, I heard a funny little thing today. Heard you and Wren are out in Belrose. Heard you came into a piece of property, some old garage out on the highway. I did not answer. Now look, he said. Beckett and I, we feel bad about how things shook out 2 years ago. We really do. We were going through a hard time. You were so young, you didn't understand. But we want to make it right. Hollis, just hear me out. That property is a money pit, sweetheart. Back taxes through the roof, buildings a teardown, middle of nowhere, but we know a developer who is buying up land out that way. We can take it off your hands. Pay the taxes, sell it for you. We'll cut you a check for $7,000 for your trouble, for you and Wren, help you girls get on your feet. $7,000. You have to understand. At that moment, in that office, with $122 left in my sock and no plan in the world, $7,000 sounded like the keys to the kingdom. It sounded like an apartment, like a year of community college, like Wren never having to look at that slip of paper for Memphis again. I looked at the wooden box on the desk. I looked at the 12 years of letters. I looked at the tiny 5-pointed star carved into the wood. No, I said. There was a long silence. Excuse me? I said no, Hollis. The answer is no. This is our place. This is where Pop-Pop wanted us. We're not selling. His voice changed, then the syrup was gone. What was underneath was not pretty. You stupid little girl. You think you can hold on to something like that? You think the county's just going to let you slide on those taxes? You think anybody out there is going to help 2 foster kids run a garage? You will lose it, Marin. You will lose it ugly. And when you do, you will come crawling back, and the offer will not be $7,000 anymore. It will be $3,000, and then it will be $1,000. And then we will own that piece of dirt anyway, and you will have nothing. Goodbye, Hollis, I said. I hung up. I turned the phone off. My hand was shaking so hard, I dropped the phone on the floor. Wren stared at me. Her eyes were huge. They know, she whispered. I nodded. I could not speak yet. We had been at Last Light Auto for less than 24 hours, and the war had already started. I want to stop right here for just a minute, because I know what some of you are feeling. I know because I felt it too, sitting on that dusty floor with my little sister and my hands shaking. You are feeling that old familiar fear. That feeling that says, who do you think you are? That feeling that says, you cannot win this one. If you are feeling it tonight with me, I want you to take a long breath. And I want you to remember every single time in your life that you were told you could not, and you did anyway. We are going to need to remember that, you and me, for what comes next. Stay with me, friend. We are just getting started. Della's diner was already half full when we walked in around 8 that morning. The smell hit me first. Bacon and coffee and something cinnamon sweet. And underneath it all, the warm, yeasty smell of biscuits that had been in the oven for exactly the right amount of time. There was a long counter with stools, and red vinyl booths along the windows, and an old jukebox in the corner that was playing something soft. Behind the counter, in a yellow apron with a chicken embroidered on the pocket, was a woman who could only be Miss Della. She was 70 if she was a day. Silver hair pulled back, big warm hands, the kind of face that has laughed a lot and cried a lot and has nothing to hide. She looked up, she saw us, and her face just broke open. "Lord have mercy," she said. "Lord have mercy. Silas, you stubborn old man, you would not believe these girls." She came around the counter so fast her apron flapped. She did not ask. She just hugged us, both of us, at the same time with those big, strong arms. I think I cried into her shoulder. I am not sure. The morning is a blur in places. "You are going to sit," she said, "right here in this booth by the window where the light is, and I'm going to feed you. And nobody is going to talk about anything sad until there are biscuits on the table." You understand me? We understood. She brought us biscuits and gravy and scrambled eggs and bacon and orange juice in cold, thick glasses. She brought Ren a hot chocolate with little marshmallows. She would not let me pay. She would not even discuss it. "Your granddaddy paid my husband's hospital bill in 1989, she said, refilling my coffee for the third time. "Cash money. Out of his own pocket. We never asked. He just did it. We have not forgotten. Belrose does not forget." By the time we left that diner, 3 other people had come over to our booth. A farmer named Harlan Pickett, who looked about 70 and had hands the size of dinner plates. His wife, Maybelle, who pressed a piece of cornbread wrapped in a napkin into Ren's hand. And an older woman named June from the hardware store, who said that anything we needed for the shop, paint or hinges or window glass, we could come to her and she would work something out. I had spent 2 years in a place where nobody said hello to me in the hallway. In one morning in Belrose, Tennessee, I had been hugged by 3 strangers and fed until I could barely stand up. When we walked out into the bright, cold sunshine of Main Street, Ren slipped her hand into mine. "This place is real," she said, like she was checking. "Yes," I said. "This place is real." We walked back out to the shop in the daylight, and for the first time, I really looked at the building we had inherited. The bones, as folks say in old houses, were good. The foundation was solid concrete, the walls were thick, the roof had 2 missing shingles, but no real rot. The 2 big bay doors were stuck, but they were not broken. The hydraulic lifts inside, the great iron giants that Pop had used to raise cars over his head, were dusty but intact. The trouble was everywhere else. The windows were filmed black, the yard was knee-high in weeds, there was a smell of mildew in one back corner where a pipe had leaked. The electrical, when I tried a light switch, sputtered and gave out. It was going to take 100 hands to bring this place back. What I did not know yet was that I had 100 hands. Earl Hatcher pulled up that afternoon with a truck bed full of tools and a thermos, and his wife, Junie, who had the same kind face he did and the same slow voice, she brought us a casserole. Real, actual, baked-in-a-dish casserole with foil on top. I almost cried again. The Picketts came too in their old Ford. Harlan with a brush hog hitched to the back, ready to mow the yard. Maybelle with a basket of cleaning supplies and a stack of clean towels and a determined look on her face. A man I had never seen before, an electrician named Roy with white hair sticking out from under his ball cap, showed up around 3. He said he had heard at the feed store that Silas Whitfield's granddaughters were trying to open the place back up. He did not charge me $1, he just got to work on the wiring. I want to be honest with you, I had spent the last 2 years believing that the world was a cold place, that you had to fight for every scrap, that nobody helped anybody without an angle. That afternoon in Belrose, Tennessee, I learned that I had been wrong. Not about the whole world, maybe, but about some of it. There are still places where folks show up. There are still places where the old debts of kindness get paid forward to the next generation. There are still places where a quiet, stubborn old man can leave a legacy of goodness, and his granddaughters can walk into the middle of it and be caught before they fall by people they have never met. If you have ever been one of those people who showed up for somebody, who brought a casserole, who fixed a fence, who took in a child who was not yours by blood, I want you to know that what you did mattered. I am living proof. Ren is living proof. Whatever kindness you spend in this world has not been wasted. Not one bit of it. I promise you that. By the end of that first week, the office was clean, the windows were clear, the big bay doors had been wrestled open, Roy had the electrical working. Ren and I had a real little bed each, donated by the Picketts, set up in the back room. Miss Della was sending food every other day. Earl had brought over a portable space heater and a working refrigerator. And every evening after the helpers had gone home, Ren and I would sit at the desk and read another bundle of Pop Pop's letters. We were rationing them. We did not want to read them all too fast. It was on the fifth night that we found the cars. I had been in the main garage sweeping out the last of the leaves and the mouse nests from one of the back corners, and I noticed two big shapes against the far wall. They were covered in heavy canvas tarps. I had assumed in the dark that they were piles of junk. Old engines, maybe. Stacks of parts. But that evening, with the lights working and the dust settled, I noticed something. The shapes were car-shaped, long, low, and curving. Ren came in behind me with her notebook. She had been keeping a notebook all week. Lists, diagrams, quotes from Pop Pop's letters that struck her. My little bird with her clever eyes. "What's under there?" she said. I grabbed a corner of one tarp. I pulled. The canvas came away in a cloud of dust and dried leaves. Ren coughed. I waved the air clear with my hand. And then we both just stood there. Underneath that tarp was a 1,968 Pontiac GTO in the deepest ocean blue I have ever seen, with hardly a scratch on her. Polished chrome, white interior, two-door beauty. She looked like she had rolled off the lot last week, and somebody had just happened to throw a sheet over her for 50 years. Ren made a small sound, like a hiccup. I went to the second tarp. My hands were shaking. Underneath was a 1,970 Plymouth Barracuda, yellow as a school bus, with black racing stripes down the hood, the kind of car men twice my age would weep over. These were not junkers, these were not project cars, these were museum pieces, restored, loved, hidden. I do not know much about money, but I knew looking at those two cars in the light of that bare overhead bulb that I was looking at more than $100,000. "Pop, Pop," I whispered. "Pop, Pop, what did you do?" Ren walked slowly around the GTO, trailing her fingers along the fender. Then she stopped. She stood very still. "Marin," she said. "Yeah, there's no keys, there's no title." She was right. Of course she was right. You cannot drive a car, you cannot sell a car, you cannot even prove a car is yours without papers. Without papers, those two beautiful machines were just very expensive lawn ornaments. But Ren had her notebook open. She was flipping back through it, through the quotes she had been collecting from Pop Pop's letters. "Rule 3, she said. "The most valuable parts are always hidden in plain sight." She looked up at me. Her eyes were shining. "It's not just the cars, Marin. There's more." That is when I really started to understand what kind of girl my little sister was becoming. We were not going to find the rest of it by accident. We were going to find it because Ren was looking. Earl came back the next morning, and I told him what we had found. He whistled long and low when he saw those cars. "Sweet Lord above," he said. "Your granddaddy was working on these the last 2 years of his life," he told me once, said they were for his girls. Said the day his girls were grown. Those cars were coming out of these tarps. I figured he was just talking, old men talk. He took off his cap, he stood there a long time. "He wasn't just talking," he said. Ren had her notebook out. She was tapping the page where she had written Rule 3. "Earl," she said, "if Pop Pop wanted to hide something important here in this garage, where would he put it?" Earl looked at her, then he looked around. His eyes settled on the long iron workbench against the far wall. On top of that workbench, bolted down with 4 heavy steel bolts, was a great big black iron bench vise, the kind of tool a mechanic uses to hold parts steady while he works on them. Pop Pop had installed that vise himself more than 30 years ago. I remembered, because I had helped him. I had been 7 years old. I had held the bolts from underneath while he tightened them from the top. Earl walked over to it. He laid his hand on the cold black iron. "Your granddaddy," he said slowly, "built this whole bench, hollow underneath, used to keep a flask in there. Back when your grandmother was trying to make him quit, she never did find it. He used to laugh about it." Ren and I looked at each other. The crank handle on the side of the vise was stiff. It had not been turned in years. I sprayed it with penetrating oil from a can on the shelf, the same brand Pop Pop had always used, and we waited. We waited the longest 5 minutes of my life. Then I tried the crank. It groaned. It resisted. And then, with a slow, tired sigh of iron, it began to turn. But here is the thing. The jaws of the vise did not move. Instead, the whole top of the vise began to rise, and along with it, the square section of wooden bench top it was bolted to rose right up like a little trap door. Pop Pop had connected the crank not to the vice straws, but to a long screw running down through the bench into the hollow underneath. Turning the crank lifted a hidden lid. The whole bench vise was the handle to a secret compartment. I have never seen anything like it. I do not expect I ever will again. Wren put both her hands over her mouth. Inside the compartment, wrapped in old red shop rags to keep the moisture out, were three things: a leather pouch, a thick manila envelope sealed with brown paper tape, and a brown grocery bag folded over twice. I took out the leather pouch first. I unwrapped it on the workbench, with the morning sun coming through the high, dusty window. Inside were two sets of car keys. One had a little blue plastic tag that said GTO. The other had a yellow tag that said CUDA. I took out the manila envelope. I opened it carefully, with Earl and Wren watching over my shoulder. Inside were two original titles of ownership: the Pontiac, the Plymouth, both signed over to Silas Whitfield. Clean, clear, notarized, real. But there was something else inside that envelope. A second document, older than the titles, stamped with a county seal. I unfolded it. I read it 3 times before my brain could take it in. It was a satisfaction mortgage, a legal proof that the loan Pop Pop had taken out on the shop years and years ago to pay for our grandmother's cancer treatments had been paid in full. Right before he died, with the very last of his savings, quietly, without telling anyone, he had cleared the debt on this building. The bank that had held that mortgage had been bought out by a bigger bank a year later. In the merger, the record of his final payment had been misplaced. The county still showed the mortgage as active. But here, in my hand, was the proof that it was not. The only real debt on Last Light Auto was the back taxes, nothing more. I sat down on the cold concrete floor. I had to, my legs would not hold me. I reached for the brown grocery bag. I opened it. Inside was banded cash. $100 bills, banded together with rubber bands. $10,000 exactly. The amount of the back taxes, he had left it for us. Every dollar we needed, tucked away inside an iron vise like a secret heart, waiting for the day his girls would think to turn the crank. Earl Hatcher took off his cap and held it against his chest, the way he had the first night on the gravel driveway. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "That's your granddaddy," he said. "That's everything he was, right there in a paper bag and a brown envelope." Wren slid down to the floor next to me. She put her head on my shoulder. The notebook was still in her lap, open to the page where she had written Rule 3. We did not say anything for a long time. "I want to talk to you, friend, for just a moment before this story turns, because what came next was hard. What came next was the part where the world reminds you that good things come with a fight. I am about to tell you about the worst night of my life and the bravest thing my 15-year-old sister has ever done. Before I do, I want you to do me a small kindness. If you are still here with me, if Marin and Wren feel a little bit real to you, hit that subscribe button and leave us a comment. Tell me, have you ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours? Have you ever stood in front of someone you were related to and realized they were not family at all? I read so many of your stories. They keep me going. Now let me tell you what happened the night the windows broke. We took the proof of mortgage and the title papers into Mr. Brennan's office the very next morning. Earl drove us himself in the gray truck, and he waited out in the parking lot with a thermos of coffee, smoking on the tailgate while we went up. I had the brown grocery bag of cash under my coat. I had never in my life been so aware of being watched, even when nobody was watching. Mr. Brennan met us at the door. When I laid the satisfaction of mortgage on his desk, he stood there a long minute, reading it twice through his thick glasses, and then he sat down very slowly in his big leather chair. "Silas," he whispered, "you magnificent, stubborn old man." He looked up at me. "This changes everything, Marin. With this paper, the bank has no claim. Once I file this with the county clerk, the only debt left on Last Light Auto will be the property taxes. Which, if I am not mistaken, you have the means to pay." I patted the bag under my coat. He nodded. "I will file this paper today. You go to the county tax office before they close. Pay in full. Get your receipt. Get 3 copies. Keep one with me, one with you, one in a safe place. And listen to me carefully." He leaned forward. "Do not tell your brothers any of this. Not yet. Let them keep thinking you are drowning. When they come at you, and they will come, we want to have all our cards in our hand and nothing in theirs." That afternoon, I walked into the Belrose County tax office with a brown paper grocery bag full of cash, and I laid down $10,000 on the counter. The clerk behind the window blinked at me for a good long moment. Then she went and got her supervisor. Then they both blinked at me. Then they counted it. Then they stamped my receipt with a hard, satisfying thunk that I will hear in my dreams for the rest of my life. Paid in full. When I walked out into the afternoon sun with that piece of paper, I felt for the first time in my life that I owned something. Not just a piece of land, not just an old building. I owned a piece of ground. I owned a place to stand. And that is when the trouble really started. It was about a week after that, the shop was coming alive. Earl had taught me how to service the hydraulic lifts and how to check the air compressor. June from the hardware store had sold us, at cost, a set of basic new tools to fill in for the ones that had walked off over the empty years. Roy had finished the wiring. We had a sign repainted by a teenage girl from the high school art class who would not take more than $20 for it. She had cried when I tried to pay her more. Last Light Auto. The letters fresh and black on white, the way Pop Pop had wanted. I was even taking my first real customer that morning, an old farmer named Mr. Cottle who had a 1991 Ford with a clutch that was slipping. Earl was going to walk me through it. Ren was at the front desk with her notebook ready to write the work order. And then the long black car pulled up. It was Beckett, my older brother, the lawyer. He stepped out in a charcoal gray suit like he was going to a board meeting. Hollis got out of the passenger side, dressed the same, and out of the back, a third man. A heavy-set man in his 50s, with thinning gray hair slicked back, a thick gold watch, and the smile of a man who has never once in his life been told no. Marin, Beckett said, his voice all polish. You remember Mr. Crowley? I did not remember Mr. Crowley. I had never met Mr. Crowley, but I knew that name. Roger Crowley. There were billboards on the highway with his name on them. Crowley Development, Crowley Holdings, Crowley this and Crowley that, all up and down East Tennessee. He held out his hand. I did not take it. Beckett kept smiling. I think we need to have a family conversation, little sister. I did not want him in the shop. But Earl had walked over from the bay, wiping his hands on a rag, and the pickets were just pulling up in their truck for their afternoon visit, and I had Ren behind me. So I let them in. As far as the office, Crowley got straight to it. The new state highway interchange, he said, the one they had been planning for 15 years, was finally approved. The path of the new road ran right past the back of my property. My piece of dirt, in his words, was about to be worth a great deal of money to a developer who needed a service plaza site. He named a number. It was not $7,000. It was not $30,000. It was $250,000. The office got very quiet. $250,000 for a piece of ground I had owned for 3 weeks, for a building my grandfather had built with his own 2 hands, for the place where my sister had finally started to smile again. Ren was watching me from the front desk. Her face was perfectly still. I looked at Beckett, at his polished shoes, at his expensive watch, at the smug little curl of his mouth. I looked at Hollis, at the way he could not quite meet my eyes. I looked at Roger Crowley, at his thick gold watch and his hungry smile, and I thought about Pop Pop's third rule. The most valuable parts are always hidden in plain sight. He had hidden us. He had hidden this place. He had hidden a piece of ground that no amount of money could buy back. I was listening. No, I said. Beckett's smile flickered. Marin, honey, you don't understand. This is generational money. This is more than you will see in 10 lifetimes. You take this offer. You set Ren up for college. You set yourself up. You walk away from this tress. No, I said again. Crowley shifted in his shoes. He glanced at Beckett, the kind of glance that says, I thought you said you could handle her. Beckett dropped the smile. You are being a child, he said. I am being a Whitfield, I said. Get out of my shop. They got out of my shop. They got into the long black car. They drove away. Earl walked over and laid his big rough hand on my shoulder. I do not know what your granddaddy would have said about all that, he said quietly. But I know exactly what he would have done, the same thing you just did. I felt about 8 feet tall for about 4 days. It was a Tuesday night when it happened. I remember because I had just sat down at the desk with a microwave dinner from the gas station, and Ren was across from me, eating one of Miss Della's leftover biscuits and writing in her notebook. The office heater was clicking. The radio was on low. Ren was humming just under her breath. The first time I'd heard her hum in 2 years. A car came up the gravel driveway, slow, no headlights. I felt it before I heard it, the way a dog feels weather coming. I stood up, I went to the window. I could just see the shape of a vehicle sitting at the edge of the dark with the engine running, the engine cut off. And then, very fast, three things happened. A door slammed. A bottle or maybe a brick came through the front office window in an explosion of glass. And a heavy can of red spray paint went sailing across the room and clanked against the far wall. Ren screamed. I dragged her down behind the desk. I held her with both arms. My heart was hitting my ribs so hard I thought it would break them. Outside, I heard footsteps. Quick. 2 sets. Heavy boots on gravel. Then the car door slammed again. The engine roared. The tires spun. They were gone. Ren was shaking against me. I could feel her teeth chattering. I held her, and I rocked her, and I whispered the same 2 words over and over. You're safe, you're safe, you're safe. When I finally stood up, on legs that did not feel like mine, and turned on the overhead light, I saw what they had done. The big front window was a ragged hole, glass everywhere. Across the back wall of the office, in dripping red letters, someone had spray painted 3 words. Sell it, girls. I called the sheriff. I called Earl. The sheriff came out and took a report. He was a soft-spoken man named Sheriff Boyd. He looked at the words on the wall a long time. He did not have to say what he was thinking. We both knew. There was no proof. There were no fingerprints. There was no witness. There were only 2 scared sisters and a broken window and 3 words on a wall. Earl arrived and sat in the office with Ren while I gave the report. He had brought his wife, Junie. She had a thermos of hot chocolate and a quilt from their bed. After the sheriff left, after Earl boarded up the window with a sheet of plywood from his truck, after Junie tucked Ren in under the quilt on the cot in the back room, I walked outside by myself. It was past midnight. The sky over Belrose was so full of stars, I could not pick out the constellations. The cold air burned my throat. I sat down on the front step of the shop. I put my face in my hands, and I cried. Like I had not cried since I was 8 years old, in the back of a state trooper's car with my baby sister asleep against my arm after they told us our mama and daddy were gone. I cried for that little girl. I cried for the woman she had to become. I cried because I did not know how to do this. I did not know how to fight a brother who was a lawyer. I did not know how to fight a developer with a private investigator. I did not know how to keep my sister safe. I sat there until the cold made my hands ache. And then I went back inside. Ren was asleep, curled up under Junie's quilt. Earl and Junie had gone home. The radio was still on low. Ren's notebook was open on the desk where she had been writing before the window broke. I looked down at the page she had been on. She had been copying out a line from one of Pop Pop's letters. I sank down into the green vinyl chair and I read what she had written. I left the codicil with Atticus on the 14th of October. Now, no matter what they do, no matter what papers they wave, this place will always be the girls'. I read it twice. Then a third time, October 14th. I sat up so fast the chair almost tipped over. Codicil. A codicil to Pop Pop's will. Dated. I did not know much about the law, but I knew enough to know what a codicil was. It was a legal amendment, a change to a will signed after the original. Whatever it said, it overrode anything earlier. I did not know yet that the very next morning, Mr. Brennan would call me with news that Beckett had filed a lawsuit. I did not know yet that Beckett would walk into a courtroom holding an older version of Pop Pop's will, a draft from before the codicil, claiming that the garage was supposed to have gone to him and Hollis along with the rest of the estate. I did not know yet that he would request and receive a temporary restraining order on the property, freezing me out of my own shop, threatening to undo everything we had built. I did not know any of that yet. But sitting in that green vinyl chair in the middle of the night with my little sister sleeping under a stranger's quilt and a sheet of plywood where my front window used to be, I knew this. October 14th. I picked up my phone with shaking hands. I scrolled back through Pop Pop's letters in my mind, trying to remember. The dates. He had written one of these letters about a meeting with Mr. Brennan, about signing a paper, about making sure his girls were safe forever. I dug through the stack of letters on the desk until I found it. The one from late October, 2 years and 4 months before he died. I unfolded it with shaking hands. I read it. Today I went to see Atticus. We signed the codicil. It is done. Whatever else happens, the shop and everything in it now belongs to my girls and to no one else. I felt 20 years later walking out of that office. I had a slice of pecan pie at Miss Della's afterwards to celebrate. I wished you had been there to share it with me. I sat there in the dim light. um, holding that letter. October 14th. I did not know yet what date was on the draft Beckett would file. I did not know yet whether the codicil would beat it. I did not know yet how long it would take or what it would cost or whether I could prove any of it. But I knew this. I had a date. I had a letter from a dead man, postmarked and dated, telling me that on a specific day, he had walked into Atticus Brennan's office and made it legally impossible for my brothers to take this place from us. The codicil existed. It was somewhere in Mr. Brennan's safe. And the next morning, at 3 minutes after 7, I was going to be on his front step. Stay with me, friend. I know I keep asking, but I mean it. We are almost there. We are almost to the part where my little sister, my Wren, my brave little bird with her notebook, walks into a courtroom and saves us both. If you have ever been saved by somebody nobody thought to look at, you are going to feel this one, I promise. I did not sleep that night. Not really. I sat in the green vinyl chair and I watched my sister breathe. I watched the plywood over the broken window. I watched the dripping red letters on the back wall, which I had not yet found the strength to clean off. Sell it, girls. I let that be a promise to myself. Every time I looked at it, I made the promise again. No. When the first gray light came up over the trees, I made coffee on the hot plate. When Earl pulled in at 6:30 with Junie beside him and a fresh thermos in his hand, I was already dressed. Earl, I said, I have to get to Mr. Brennan's office. Today, right now. Earl looked at me. He looked at the plywood. He looked at Wren, just waking up in the back room. Get in the truck, he said. Wren came too. Of course she came. She would not be left behind, and I did not blame her. She brought her notebook. She buckled herself in the middle seat of Earl's truck, in her old coat with the sleeves a little too short, and we drove the 2 hours back into the city with the radio playing soft country music and nobody saying very much at all. Mr. Brennan was already on his front step. Mr. Brennan was always already on his front step, I think. He saw the look on my face when we got out of the truck and he opened the door without a word. I told him about the bottle through the window, about the red letters, about Beckett showing up with Roger Crowley. And then I laid Pop-Pop's letter on his desk, the one dated late October, and I asked him, Mr. Brennan, is there a codicil, a real one, a signed one? He looked at me a long moment. Then he stood up. He walked over to the big black safe in the corner of his office, the kind of safe that has been in a family for 3 generations. He spun the dial. He opened the door. He took out a folded document tied with a red ribbon. He brought it back to the desk. He laid it down. He untied the ribbon. He unfolded it. Signed by your grandfather, he said, on the morning of October 14th. Witnessed by myself and by Miss Della Pruitt, who happened to be in my office that day, delivering me a pie. Notarized that afternoon at the county courthouse. Properly recorded. Properly filed. He turned the document so I could read it. There were several legal paragraphs I could barely understand, but the part that mattered was clear. I, Silas Joseph Whitfield, do hereby amend my last will and testament. The property known as Last Light Auto, located at 1247 Old Highway 70, Belrose, Tennessee, along with all contents thereof, including but not limited to vehicles, tools, and personal effects, is to be held in trust for the sole benefit of my granddaughters, Maren Elise Whitfield and Wren Caroline Whitfield, and is not to be considered part of the general estate. This trust shall be activated on the date of Maren Elise Whitfield's 18th birthday and shall be administered, in case of any dispute, by Atticus Brennan of Brennan and Associates. I read it. Then I read it again. Wren read it over my shoulder. She put her hand on the page, right over Pop-Pop's signature. He took care of us, she whispered. He had... From beyond the grave, he had reached forward 2 years and 4 months into the future, and he had reached out with a sheet of paper, and he had taken care of his girls. Mr. Brennan was already on the phone, to the courthouse, to Beckett's lawyer, to a judge he had known for 30 years. He hung up. He looked at me. Be at the Belrose County Courthouse at 1 o'clock on Friday. Bring your sister, bring this letter, bring the tax receipt, bring the satisfaction of mortgage, wear something nice. We are going to make your brother very sorry he picked this fight. That Friday, at 10 minutes to 1, Wren and I walked into the Belrose County Courthouse hand in hand. I was wearing a navy blue dress that Miss Della had pulled out of her own closet and altered for me overnight, sitting at her kitchen table with reading glasses on her nose and pins in her mouth. Wren wore a soft yellow sweater Maybelle Pickett had knitted for her years ago and saved for some daughter who never came, and had pressed into Wren's hands the morning before with tears in her eyes. Earl and Junie were in the front row. Miss Della was beside them, the same Della whose biscuits had kept us alive those first weeks, in her Sunday dress with her purse on her lap. Harlan and Maybelle, Roy, the electrician. June from the hardware store, Pastor Wilkes from the Baptist church on the hill. Half of Belrose was in that courtroom. Beckett and Hollis were at the other table in their suits, with a high-paid lawyer between them who did not know any of those people in the front row and could not understand why they were all glaring at him. I will not give you all of it. The legal back and forth, the objections and the rulings, the careful, slow voice of Judge Hightower, who had known Pop Pop for 40 years and had bought his own first car off him in 1981. I will give you the moment that mattered. When Mr. Brennan stood up and produced the codicil, when Miss Della Pruitt was sworn in as a witness and confirmed in front of God and everybody that, yes, she had stood in Atticus Brennan's office on October 14th, and yes, she had watched Silas Joseph Whitfield sign that very piece of paper, and no, she did not have any reason to lie about it, and would the gentleman in the gray suit kindly stop interrupting her? When the judge read the codicil, slowly, out loud, in the quiet of that wood-paneled room, when he laid the paper down and looked over his glasses at Beckett and said, "Counselor, your motion is denied. The restraining order is dissolved. The property remains with Miss Marin Whitfield and her sister, in trust as described. I would also like to advise you, sir, off the record, that filing what appears to be a superseded draft of a will in this court was an unwise decision. I will leave the rest of that conversation to your state bar." Beckett's face went the color of milk. Hollis would not look at me at all. I sat there, holding my sister's hand, and I did not cry. I had cried so much already. I just sat there and I let it wash over me. The relief, the strange, almost unbearable joy. The feeling of a man I had loved with my whole heart, reaching across 2 years and 4 months just to put his hand on my shoulder one more time and say, "I have got you, my brave one." That evening, Earl came by the shop with 2 bottles of root beer. He sat down on the front step beside me. The sun was getting low. The sky over Belrose was turning all the colors a Tennessee sky can turn at the end of a good day. "There's something your granddaddy made me promise to tell you," he said, when the fight was over. Not before. He didn't want it muddying the water. I waited. "Your daddy," Earl said quietly. "Marcus. He tried to sell this shop, Marin, back in 1998, before you were born. He had your granddaddy's signature forged on a sale document. Tried to push it through behind Silas's back. I did not breathe. Silas caught it in time, stopped the sale, and then he did the hardest thing a father can do. He forgave his own son, took him fishing the next weekend, never spoke of it again. But he never forgot either. Your granddaddy told me, sitting right here on this step about a year before he died, he said, 'Earl, Marcus's boys are going to be just like him. I can see it already. And those 2 little girls are going to pay the price unless I do something now.' Earl looked at me. That's why he built the trust the way he did. That's why he hid the cars. That's why he buried the letters. He wasn't just protecting you from your brother's Marin. He was protecting you from a thing that runs in the blood of this family, a thing he could not fix in his own son, but by God, he was going to fix it for his granddaughters." I sat there a long time, holding my bottle of root beer, not drinking it. Beckett and Hollis were not just greedy men, they were their father's sons, our father's sons. And Pop Pop had seen it coming 2 generations out. He had planted a flag in the ground for Ren and me decades before we needed it, because he knew the storm was coming. "The Whitfield men," Earl said, lifting his bottle in a slow toast, "have a problem. The Whitfield women," I said, "are going to be just fine." Earl laughed, the first real laugh I had heard out of him. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Yes, ma'am, you are..." We do not need to talk about my brothers much more after that. They came one more time weeks later to the shop, not as enemies, not exactly. Beckett had been disbarred, or close to it. Crowley had dropped them the minute the courthouse story got out. They came in the gray light of a fall afternoon in old clothes, looking like men who had finally seen their own faces in a real mirror. Beckett tried to talk, tried to use the word family. I gave him a picture, an old Polaroid I had found in one of Pop Pop's letters. The 4 of us, the 4 Whitfield grandchildren, when I was about 10 and Ren was about 7 and the boys were teenagers, all of us together on the front porch of Pop Pop's house on Maple Street. Pop Pop in the middle with his arm around all of us. On the back, in his blocky hand, he had written, "Some are only blood, not family." I gave the picture to Beckett. I did not say anything. He read the back, his face changed. He gave the picture back to me. He did not say goodbye. He and Hollis got into their car and they drove away, and I have not seen either of them since. I would like to tell you I felt triumphant. I would like to tell you I felt anything dramatic. What I felt was tired and free. I drove the Pontiac GTO that summer. Earl helped me get her registered and inspected, and on the first warm Sunday in June, we took her out on the highway with the windows down and Wren riding shotgun and her hair flying behind her like a flag. The Plymouth we sold. A collector in Knoxville drove out to look at her, and he wept when he saw her, and he wrote me a check for $85,000 on the spot. He promised me she would be loved. I believe him. I still get pictures of her sometimes in his garage with the chrome polished and her paint gleaming. That money did not change us much. We did not buy a fancy car. We did not move. We did not run. What we did was we put a new roof on the shop. We put new big bay doors on the front. We poured a fresh concrete pad behind the building for an addition, a small apartment, 2 real bedrooms, and a kitchen with a window for me and Wren to live in. We paid Earl Hatcher a proper salary, since Lord knows he had earned one 100 times over. We put money away for Wren's college, on top of what we had. And we kept the sign, we kept the name, Last Light Auto. Earl told me that Pop, near the end, used to sit on the front step of the shop at sunset and watch the light fade across the highway. He said it was the last light of his day. He said it was his favorite hour. He said it was the hour he felt closest to my grandmother, who had passed 7 years before him. That was what he had named the place for. Not the end of something, the hour just before the end, the gentle hour, the hour when the world is golden and you can see what you have built before the dark comes. I think about that when I close up the shop at night now. I think about how he gave us his girls, the last light, not the leftovers, not the scraps, the gold, the good warm hour at the end of his day. One more thing. It was about 6 weeks after the courthouse. Wren and I were eating supper in the office. Miss Della had sent over a pot roast. Earl had brought over the mail. There was a thick envelope from Mr. Brennan in the pile. I opened it. Inside was a letter on his office stationery, and a second envelope, much older, addressed to Wren in Pop's hand. Dear Marin, Mr. Brennan's letter began. Per the terms of your grandfather's trust, I have been holding the enclosed document for Wren until such time as her sister was of age and the shop was secure. Both conditions are now met. Please give this to her with my warmest regards. Yours in deepest respect, Atticus Brennan. I handed Wren the second envelope. She opened it. Inside was a single page in Pop's hand, and a smaller folded paper, the kind a bank sends. She read the letter first. I watched her face. I watched her hand come up to her mouth. She handed it to me. My sweet bird, Wren. From the day you came home from the hospital 15 years and 3 weeks ago, your old granddaddy did something every single month. I put a little money into an account for you. Not much, $20 sometimes, $50 in a good month. $100 at Christmas. It grew. It grew more than you would believe. I added to it every month I was alive, and I asked Atticus to keep adding for me from a small trust until the day you turn 18. By the time you read this, my sweet girl, there will be enough in this account for 4 years of college. Wherever you want to go, whatever you want to study, your sister will tell you you are smart. Your sister is right. You see things, Wren. You always did. Go and see them. Go and be them. Your old granddaddy will be in the seats when you graduate. You just won't be able to look over and find me, but I will be there. I promise you that. I love you, sweet bird. Pop. Wren did not make a sound. She just leaned forward across the desk and laid her head down on the wood, right next to the little 5-pointed star, and she let herself feel it. I came around and I held her. I held her for a long, long time. That little folded paper from the bank, when I opened it later, showed a balance of just over $92,000. He had been saving quietly, stubbornly, for 15 years, for a granddaughter he would never see go to college. Wren went to the wall of the office that night, the one I had finally repainted over the red letters. She took down a framed picture I had hung there a few weeks back, the Polaroid. The 4 Whitfield grandchildren on Pop's porch. She did not look at the front of it. She turned it over to the back, to where Pop had written, "Some are only blood, not family." Underneath his words, in her careful pencil hand, she wrote 3 more. "And some are home." She hung the picture back on the wall. That was Wren. That has always been Wren, the one who sees what the rest of us miss. It is 2 years later now as I tell you this. The shop is going strong. We have 3 lifts working. Earl has officially come out of retirement and works with us 3 days a week. He says it keeps him young. Junie says it keeps him out of her kitchen. Both things are true. Ren is starting college this fall. She is going to study mechanical engineering at the University of Tennessee. She wants to design cars, she says. She wants to design them so that they last forever, so that nobody has to throw a good thing away just because it has gotten old. She still keeps a notebook. I drive the Pontiac to the courthouse every April 14th, the anniversary of the codicil, and I sit in the parking lot for a few minutes with the engine running, and I say thank you out loud to my grandfather. Some Sundays after church at Pastor Wilkes's Baptist Church on the Hill, we have everyone out to the shop, the Picketts, Earl and Junie, Miss Della and her grown kids, June from the hardware store, Roy the electrician, the teenage girl who painted our sign, who has graduated now and is studying art in Nashville. We pull a long folding table out of the office. We put red and white checked cloths on it. We eat fried chicken and biscuits and Miss Stella's potato salad and Maybelle's coconut cake. Earl tells the same 3 stories about Pop Pop he has been telling for 2 years. They're still funny. When the sun gets low, we sit out front on a row of mismatched chairs and we watch the last light fall across the fields. That is the hour Pop Pop loved. I think he would be proud. If you have stayed with me all the way through this story, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really mean it. I know I am only a voice on a screen to you, but the truth is, you are not just a viewer to me either. You are the person who sat with me on a curb outside Street Bernadette's. You are the person who held my hand in a courtroom. You are the person who sent the casserole I never got to thank you for. You are part of this family of strangers who keep the kindness moving forward, generation after generation, casserole after casserole, kind word after kind word. If this story moved you, I would be so grateful if you would consider subscribing to this channel. We tell stories here about second chances, about people who were counted out and stood back up, about finding family in places nobody thought to look. And before you go, I have a question for you down in the comments. Have you ever inherited something that turned out to be more than you thought it was? Maybe it was not a building, maybe it was a recipe, maybe it was a saying your mother used. Maybe it was just a way of looking at the world that somebody who loved you handed down to you when you were not paying attention. Tell me about it. Tell me their name. Let us say their names together tonight in the comments so they know we have not forgotten. Because that is the real inheritance, friend. Not the money, not the building, the love that goes on working long after the hands that gave it are still. Good night from Belrose. Good night from Marin and Ren. Good night from Pop Pop. We will see you in the next one.